The thunderous din of shocked shouts and gasps filled the Grand Galactic Council chamber as the human diplomat Jeffrey Warren calmly stated that Earth had water, oceans of it, right on the surface. Primus, the Lemnorian counselor, had just gravely informed the assembled alien representatives of the galaxy's most advanced races that the warlike Zithians had developed a terrifying weapon, a device that could instantly vaporize a planet's water. Within 30 days, the Zithians planned to test their devastating invention on a defenseless inhabited world. Aquinos, home to a peaceful amphibious species, 90% ocean. Without water, every Aquinosi would quickly die. Their remote planet, Primus sadly explained, was too far for even the Council's swiftest ships to reach in time to evacuate. A shield of rare hydronium was their sole hope, but it only formed deep underground in the presence of abundant liquid water, a resource every Council race had long ago depleted. Until the humans spoke, the entire chamber erupted. 100%, Jeffrey said. Earth's surface is 70% ocean. I'd bet my life there's hydronium down there. This is tremendous news, Primus exclaimed. With your planet's vast hydronium deposits, we can forge a planetary shield to protect Aquinos, but our scans show no surface water on Earth. Primus's eyes widened. Jeffrey Warren, you are our only hope. We need you to lead an extraction team back to your Earth. Help us locate your concealed water sources to secure the hydronium. I would go myself, but... He glanced down, embarrassed. Lemnorian teleporters cannot operate within 1 light-year of dihydrogen monoxide. Jeffrey's brow furrowed. The fate of an entire species, billions of lives, now rested on his shoulders and on Earth's precious water. Failure meant genocide. He squared his stance and met Primus's desperate, pleading eyes. I'll do it, whatever it takes. Jeffrey rushed through the corridors of the space station, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to get to his ship as fast as possible. There was no time to waste. The fate of an entire planet rested on his shoulders. As he approached the hangar bay where his vessel was docked, Primus came running up to him, holding out a small, oddly shaped device. Jeffrey, wait, Primus called out. Take this with you. It's a hydronium detector. It will help you locate the largest deposits on Earth. Jeffrey took the device from Primus, turning it over in his hands. It was unlike anything he had seen before. Thank you, Primus. I'll put it to good use. He stowed the detector securely in his pocket and boarded his ship. Within moments he had undocked from the station and set a course for Earth. Once he was a safe distance away, Jeffrey opened an encrypted channel on his quantum communicator. He needed to inform Earth's leaders about the critical mission, but as soon as he began transmitting, the signal was intercepted and jammed. What the hell? Jeffrey muttered under his breath. He tried to trace the source of the interference, his fingers flying over the controls, but whoever was blocking his transmission was good, really good. He couldn't get a lock on their location. Growing more alarmed by the second, Jeffrey quickly sent a burst transmission to the Galactic Council, apprising them of the situation. If someone was trying to stop him from reaching Earth, they likely knew about the hydronium. His mission had been compromised. Jeffrey engaged his ship's cloaking device, a state-of-the-art system that would render him invisible to most sensors. He also powered up the experimental Icarus drive. It was a risky move. The drive was still in testing, but it would allow him to reach Earth in a fraction of the normal time. He had to get to the hydronium before anyone else did. As his ship hurtled through space, Jeffrey pored over all the available data on hydronium. He needed to figure out where the most accessible deposits would be, but as he studied the geological records, a sinking feeling settled in his gut. The Council's information was centuries out of date. They still thought Earth was mostly covered in oceans, but Jeffrey knew the truth. Climate change had dramatically reshaped the planet's surface over the past few hundred years. The seas had receded, leaving miles of dry seabed and sprawling human cities. The hydronium deposits could be buried under countless tons of rock and dirt, or worse, they could be directly beneath major population centers. Extracting the compound without being detected would be almost impossible. Jeffrey altered his course, aiming for the coordinates of the ancient Marianas Trench. It was a desperate gamble, but if any place on Earth still had easily accessible hydronium, it would be the deepest point on the planet. As his cloaked ship knifed through Earth's atmosphere, Jeffrey gripped the controls tightly. The hydronium was down there somewhere. He just had to find it, and find a way to get it off-world without whoever had intercepted his transmission noticing. It was a daunting task, but Jeffrey had no choice. The survival of the Aquinosi depended on him. He would not, could not fail, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Jeffrey's ship touched down with a soft thud on the cracked, sun-baked seabed that had once been the bottom of the Marianas Trench. He popped the hatch and clambered out, the hydronium detector already pulsing urgently in his hand. The readings were off the charts. There was a motherlode of the stuff nearby. Jeffrey took a few steps forward and froze, his mouth falling open in shock. There, rising out of the barren seabed like a ghost from the past, was the husk of an old undersea research station. The facility had been built at the bottom of the trench back when there was still an ocean to build under. Now, with the seas long gone, it stood exposed, an eerie relic of a bygone age. Suddenly a glint of movement caught Jeffrey's eye. He whipped his head around and saw a face peering out at him from one of the facility's windows. Shit, he'd been seen. Without a second thought, Jeffrey slapped the button on his personal cloaking device. As the invisibility field shimmered over his body, he broke into a sprint, heading straight for a yawning fissure in the seabed, where the detector indicated the hydronium concentration was highest. Behind him, he heard the whine of an engine firing up and a man's voice yelling. Jeffrey risked a glance over his shoulder and saw a figure tearing out of the facility on a sleek hoverbike, rocketing towards him at breakneck speed. Jeffrey poured on the speed, his heart hammering in his chest. Just as he reached the edge of the chasm, a bolt of searing plasma crackled over his head, missing him by inches. With a desperate leap, Jeffrey hurled himself into the abyss. He hit the ground hard and rolled, using his momentum to carry him deeper into the shadows. The hoverbike screeched to a halt at the lip of the fissure, its searchlight stabbing into the darkness. But Jeffrey was already gone, swallowed up by the winding tunnels. Gasping for breath, Jeffrey pulled out the detector again. The signal led him onward, deeper and deeper into the bowels of the earth. He squirmed through crevices barely wider than his shoulders, shimmied down shafts that seemed to plunge into the planet's core. At last he dragged himself into a small cave, and the detector went haywire, its pulsing reaching a fever pitch. The walls of the cavern glittered with clusters of luminous blue crystals, raw hydronium, more than he'd ever seen in one place. Jeffrey pulled out his laser cutter and got to work, carefully extracting a hefty load of the precious compound. He had just stowed the last of the crystals when a deep, ominous rumble began to echo through the tunnels. The rumble quickly built to a deafening roar. The cave walls began to shake so violently that Jeffrey feared they would collapse on top of him. With a sudden, horrible realization, he understood what was happening. His laser cutter's residual heat must have destabilized the hydronium, causing it to react with the last traces of water deep in the planet's crust. Jeffrey turned and ran, pelting back through the quaking tunnels as fast as his legs could carry him. Behind him, scalding jets of steam belched from the fissures in the rock, searing his skin even as he ran. He burst from the chasm in a cloud of billowing vapor and sprinted for his ship. But he skidded to a halt as he saw the man on the hoverbike already there, plasma rifle leveled right at Jeffrey's chest. "Who the hell are you?" the man barked, his finger tightening on the trigger. "And what were you doing with those crystals?" Jeffrey slowly uncloaked, his hands raised in a calming gesture as he faced the man aiming the plasma rifle directly at his chest. "Easy now," Jeffrey said, his voice level. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm on a mission to save lives." The man's eyes narrowed, but his gun lowered a fraction of an inch. "Decloak fully," he ordered. "No sudden moves." Jeffrey complied, the invisibility field dissipating to reveal his human form. The man's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "You're from the Union," he said, lowering his weapon further. "I thought I was the only one left out here." "Dr. Saul Iverson, I presume?" Jeffrey asked, recognizing the man from Galactic Council records. "Jeffrey Warren, Special Envoy from the Galactic Council." Jeffrey quickly outlined the imminent threat to Aquinos and the critical importance of the hydronium crystals. As he listened, Iverson's expression shifted from suspicion to grave understanding. "I've been studying those crystals for years," he said, "trying to find a way to restore Earth's oceans. But if Aquinos needs them to survive, that takes priority." Together, the two men hurried to transfer the precious hydronium from the cavern to Jeffrey's waiting ship. As Jeffrey prepared to depart, Iverson pressed a data chip into his hand. "This contains all my research on hydronium," Iverson said urgently. "I pray it helps you save Aquinos." Jeffrey nodded his thanks and ascended the ramp into his ship. But just as he reached for the hatch controls, a massive explosion rocked the ground, hurling both men off their feet. Jeffrey and Iverson locked eyes, the same shocked realization passing between them. The notorious criminal syndicate must have intercepted Jeffrey's transmission to the Council. "For you have 10 seconds to comply," the voice continued. 10, 9, 8... In a burst of desperate speed, Jeffrey lunged for his ship's controls as Iverson sprinted for his hoverbike, plasma rifle in hand. The Shadow Collective ship's weapons glowed ominously. Jeffrey slammed the ignition, and his vessel leapt into the sky on a column of flame. The black ship immediately gave chase, its lasers searing the air around Jeffrey's hull. On the ground, Iverson gunned his hoverbike and raced after the two ships, firing his rifle in an attempt to draw the Shadow Collective's attention. Jeffrey wrenched the controls, putting every ounce of his piloting skills to the test as he tried to evade the relentless pursuit. Laser blasts flashed past his view screen, far too close for comfort. He knew he couldn't lead the Shadow Collective back to the Galactic Council. With a sharp twist of the controls, Jeffrey sent his ship hurtling towards the debris-strewn remains of Earth's orbital satellite network. If he could just reach that treacherous maze of wreckage, he might be able to shake his deadly tail. Jaw clenched, Jeffrey pushed the accelerator to the floor, the Shadow Collective vessel hot on his heels as they raced towards the perilous debris field looming ahead. Jeffrey's knuckles whitened as he wrenched the controls, threading his ship through the treacherous debris field. The Shadow Collective vessel dogged his every move, undaunted by the deadly obstacles streaking past on all sides. A massive slab of jagged metal loomed ahead. Jeffrey cut his engines and twisted the ship into a gut-wrenching spin. His momentum carried him behind the wreckage just as the Shadow Collective ship roared past, losing sight of its quarry. Engines still dark, Jeffrey powered up his weapons, locking onto the enemy's propulsion system. His fingers flew over the controls, diverting every scrap of energy to the plasma cannons. Twin bolts of incandescent plasma leapt from his ship, spearing the Shadow Collective vessel's engines. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the engines exploded in a blinding flare, hurling the black ship into an uncontrolled tumble. Jeffrey punched the ignition. His ship surged forward, engines howling as he rocketed away from his crippled pursuer. Suddenly the comm panel crackled to life. "Jeffrey!" Iverson's strained voice filled the cockpit. "I took out the Shadow Collective ground forces, but I found something in the wreckage. They've been experimenting with hydronium, trying to weaponize it. If they stabilize it..." Ice flooded Jeffrey's veins. If the Shadow Collective could control hydronium, entire worlds would be at their mercy. "You have to get the hydronium to Aquinos," Iverson urged. "But watch your back, there could be more of them out there." "Understood." Jeffrey killed the transmission, mind racing. He cleared the debris field and reached for the lightspeed controls, but a shrill alarm pierced the cockpit. The long-range sensors had detected a massive anomaly dead ahead. Jeffrey stared at the view screen. A wormhole roiled before him, pulsing with an eerie blue radiance, uncharted, unpredictable. Jeffrey hesitated, hand hovering over the controls. But as he double-checked his star charts, he realized the wormhole could shave precious time off his journey to Aquinos. Time he didn't have, not with the Shadow Collective hot on his heels. Jeffrey gritted his teeth and diverted all power to the shields. The ship plunged into the seething vortex. The wormhole's energy slammed into the ship like a physical blow. The hull groaned, the deck bucking beneath Jeffrey's feet. Blinding blue light flooded the cockpit. Jeffrey fought the controls with every ounce of strength, struggling to hold the ship together as the anomaly raged around him. Just as he feared the vessel would disintegrate, the turbulence ceased. The blue glow faded. Scarcely daring to breathe, Jeffrey checked the instruments. Incredibly, he had emerged in the Aquinos system. Relief surged through him, but it was short-lived. As the view screen cleared, Jeffrey's blood ran cold. A massive Shadow Collective fleet encircled Aquinos, dozens of ships bristling with weapons, and at the heart of the armada, a colossal vessel loomed, dwarfing the others. Its primary weapon was powering up, aimed directly at Aquinos' oceans. Jeffrey slammed his fist on the firing controls, his plasma cannons spitting blue-white bolts of superheated energy at the Shadow Collective flagship. The bolts splashed against the behemoth's shields, dissipating harmlessly. "Come on, you bastard," Jeffrey growled. He couldn't fail now, not with billions of lives at stake. Undaunted, he launched a salvo of quantum torpedoes. The projectiles streaked through the void, detonating against the flagship's shields in a staccato of blinding flashes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the enemy's shields flickered and died, unable to withstand the onslaught. But the flagship's primary weapon remained active, its barrel glowing an angry crimson as it built towards critical charge. A cold realization settled in Jeffrey's gut. He was outmatched. One ship against an entire armada, with a planet-killer weapon seconds from firing. In a last desperate gambit, he opened a channel and broadcast an emergency plea to the Galactic Council, praying that someone, anyone, would answer. "This is Jeffrey Warren on emergency frequency. Aquinos is under imminent threat from Shadow Collective forces, requesting immediate assistance." "Jeffrey, I intercepted your message." It was Primus, his voice tight with urgency. "The Council's fleet is en route, but they won't reach you in time. You have to stop that weapon from firing at all costs." Jeffrey's hands clenched on the controls. "I'm trying, Primus, but I'm just one ship. I can't—" "I'm sending you coordinates to a weak point in the flagship's hull," Primus cut in. "A thermal exhaust port. If you can hit it with a concentrated plasma beam, it might destabilize their main reactor." Data streamed across Jeffrey's display. There, a small thermal port barely 2 meters wide. A 1-in-a-million shot. Around him, the Shadow Collective fleet closed in, their weapons lighting up space. Jeffrey wrenched the controls, sending his ship into a dizzying spiral, enemy fire streaking past on all sides. Alerts screamed in the cockpit as the flagship's point defense turrets locked on, stitching Jeffrey's shields with laser fire. Shield strength plummeted, the cockpit bathed in the red glow of warning lights. Jeffrey lined up the shot, the thermal port dead in his sights. His finger tightened on the trigger. Plasma lanced from his ship, a continuous beam of blinding blue-white, pouring into the tiny exhaust port. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then a ripple of explosions raced along the flagship's hull, growing in intensity until the entire vessel vanished in a massive fireball. The shockwave slammed into Jeffrey's ship, alarms shrieking as he fought the controls. The remaining Shadow Collective ships scattered, their formation broken by the loss of their command ship. Jeffrey didn't hesitate. Diverting all power to engines, he rocketed towards Aquinos, engaging his cloaking device as he punched through the planet's orbital defenses. Vast oceans filled his view screen, stretching from horizon to horizon. Jeffrey's heart sank. Where on this water-covered world could he land to deliver the hydronium? Suddenly his comm panel lit up like a holiday display, a barrage of incoming transmissions on all frequencies. Aquanite voices, clicks and whistles translated to desperate pleas. They knew he was here. They were begging for help. Jeffrey locked onto the source of the transmissions, plotting a landing course. He could only pray he wasn't too late. Jeffrey's ship touched down on the floating platform with a hydraulic hiss. The hatch popped open, and he emerged, hydronium container secured in his arms. A throng of Aquanites surged forward, their webbed hands reaching out to him in desperate welcome. An imposing figure pushed through the crowd, Admiral Zhen, leader of the Aquanites. His blue scales glinted in the harsh sunlight as he grasped Jeffrey's arm. "Jeffrey Warren, we are eternally grateful for your arrival," Zhen said, his voice a deep rumble. "But I fear we have little time. The Zithian weapon has already begun its terrible work." Jeffrey followed Zhen's grim gaze out to the horizon. The once vibrant azure of Aquinos's oceans had dulled to a sickly green. Bloated corpses of fish and other marine life bobbed on the surface, a chilling testament to the weapon's devastating effect. "We have to work fast," Jeffrey said, handing the hydronium container to Zhen. "Here's what you need to do to process and disperse it." As Jeffrey quickly instructed the Aquanites, they hurried to comply, setting up the equipment with a focused intensity. But even as they worked, Jeffrey's comm crackled to life. "Jeffrey, it's Primus," came the Councillor's strained voice. "Our fleet has engaged the Shadow Collective forces in orbit, but our scans show a Shadow Collective ground team heading your way. We believe they're after the hydronium." Jeffrey's jaw clenched. He should have known the Shadow Collective wouldn't give up so easily. "Understood, Primus, I'll handle it." He cut the transmission and turned to Zhen. "Admiral, we need to set up a defensive perimeter around the platform. I'll arm your warriors." Zhen nodded, already barking orders to his troops. Jeffrey sprinted back to his ship, throwing open the armory. He grabbed an armful of plasma rifles and jetpacks, distributing them to the Aquanite warriors. "Open fire!" Jeffrey yelled, leveling his own rifle. A volley of plasma bolts streaked towards the dropship, impacting its shields in a flash of blinding light. The ship returned fire, heavy lasers strafing the platform, cutting through metal and stone like butter. Jeffrey realized with a sinking feeling that they were outgunned. The dropship's superior firepower would tear through their defenses in minutes. "Focus on protecting the hydronium equipment," he shouted to the Aquanites. "I'll draw their fire." He aimed his rifle at the ship's engines and fired, pouring bolt after bolt into the exposed machinery. The engines sparked and sputtered, belching black smoke. The dropship listed to one side, losing altitude. But as it descended, the cargo bay doors yawned open. A squad of Shadow Collective soldiers armed to the teeth and equipped with their own jetpacks leapt out, racing towards Jeffrey in a deadly swarm. Laser bolts crisscrossed the sky as Jeffrey engaged the soldiers, twisting and rolling to avoid their fire. One by one, he outmaneuvered them, his plasma bolts finding their marks with unerring accuracy. Shadow Collective soldiers plummeted into the ocean, their jetpacks sparking and sputtering. But even as Jeffrey took out the last soldier, a searing pain lanced through his shoulder. His jetpack had taken a direct hit, its engines whining in protest. Trailing smoke, Jeffrey spiraled downwards, fighting to control his descent. He hit the platform hard, rolling to a stop in a clatter of sparking machinery. Groaning, Jeffrey staggered to his feet, his jetpack falling away in sputtering pieces. But the sight that greeted him turned his blood to ice. The Shadow Collective dropship had crashed nose first into the platform, its hull split open like a rotten fruit. And from its wreckage a monster emerged. A massive warmech, towering over the Aquanites, its metal hull glinting in the sun. Its weapons swiveled, locking onto the hydronium processing equipment with a whir of servos. Jeffrey snatched up his rifle, his heart pounding. He had to stop that mech or all would be lost. Jeffrey's plasma bolts splashed uselessly against the warmech's armor. The machine turned ponderously, fixing Jeffrey with glowing red optical sensors. Its arm rose, a built-in plasma cannon humming to life. Jeffrey hurled himself aside as a blinding plasma blast obliterated the platform where he'd stood a heartbeat before. Molten metal splattered, the edges of the blast crater glowing white-hot. He fired again, aiming for the mech's joints, its optics, anywhere that looked vulnerable. The plasma bolts ricocheted off harmlessly, This walking tank was impervious to handheld weapons. The mech's cannon glowed, building to another shot. Jeffrey sprinted for his ship, zigzagging frantically. A plasma bolt sizzled past his ear, close enough to scorch his hair. He leapt into the cockpit, fingers flying over the controls. The engines roared to life. Jeffrey wrenched the flight stick, peeling away as another plasma blast scorched the platform black. He circled the mech, scanning for weaknesses. Its armor was seamless, an impenetrable shell of advanced composites. Jeffrey gritted his teeth. There had to be a way. A thought struck him like lightning. Iverson's data chip, the hydronium research. Jeffrey fumbled it out of his pocket, jamming it into the computer's port. Data streamed across the screen. His eyes locked on a crucial detail. Hydronium destabilizes explosively when exposed to a specific electromagnetic frequency. That was it. Jeffrey hit the comm. Admiral Jen, I need your warriors to target the mech's optics, blind it, keep it disoriented. I've got a plan. Understood, Jen replied, his voice steady. We will do our part. As the Aquanite warriors took up positions, Jeffrey raced to prep his ship's EMP generator. He just needed one clear shot. Plasma fire erupted from the Aquanite's rifles, peppering the mech's optics. The machine reeled, its cannon firing wildly as its sensors overloaded. Jeffrey saw his opening. He dove, pushing the ship's engines to the max. The mech loomed ahead, filling his view screen. At the last possible second, he triggered the EMP. A pulse of invisible energy rippled out, engulfing the mech's torso, right where Jeffrey suspected its hydronium core was housed. For a breathless instant, nothing happened. Then the mech convulsed, blue lightning crawling over its frame. Smoke belched from its joints as it staggered drunkenly. The mech's chestplate burst open, revealing a pulsing blue core. The hydronium, destabilized by the EMP, swelled and brightened like a miniature sun. Jeffrey wrenched the flight stick, pulling away with all the speed he could coax from the protesting engines. Behind him, the mech vanished in a blinding flash. A thunderous boom shook the air. Jeffrey's ship bucked and yawed in the shockwave. Flaming shrapnel rained into the ocean, throwing up hissing gouts of steam. Glowing chunks of twisted metal spun lazily through the air, trailing smoke. Jeffrey circled back, setting his ship down on the ruined platform. Admiral Jen picked his way through the smoldering debris, his expression one of profound gratitude. The hydronium processing is nearly finished, Jen reported. Already our oceans begin to heal. Aquinos will survive, thanks to you. Jeffrey opened his mouth to reply, but his comlink crackled urgently. Primus's voice filled the cockpit tight with barely controlled fear. Jeffrey, the Shadow Collective has invaded Earth. They're after your planet's hydronium deposits. You must go now. Earth needs her hero. Jeffrey's blood ran cold. After everything, the battle was far from over. He met Jen's eyes, saw his own grim resolve mirrored there. Earth was in danger, and he was her last hope. Jeffrey bolted from the floating platform, his boots pounding on the metal. He leapt into his ship and slammed the hatch shut. Admiral Jen, I have to go, he said over the comm. Earth is under attack. I'll return if you need me again, I promise. Go, Jeffrey Warren, Jen replied, his voice crackling with static. Your world needs you. May the tides be with you. Jeffrey punched the ignition. The engines roared to life. He rocketed skyward, the blue oceans of Aquinos receding behind him as he tore through the atmosphere. In seconds, he'd cleared the planet's gravity well. Jeffrey plotted a course back to the wormhole, his fingers flying over the nav computer. He opened a channel to Earth, trying to raise Iverson. Nothing but dead air. A cold knot formed in Jeffrey's gut as he plunged into the swirling vortex. Blinding blue light filled the cockpit. The ship bucked and yawed in the turbulence. Jeffrey gritted his teeth, knuckles white on the controls. The wormhole spat him out in Earth's solar system. Jeffrey's breath caught in his throat. A scene of utter chaos greeted him. Dozens of Shadow Collective warships swarmed over Earth like angry hornets. Their weapons lanced down, raking the planet's surface with fire. Explosions blossomed in the atmosphere. each one representing unimaginable devastation. Earth's defense fleet, a ragtag assembly of ships from every human faction, swarmed around the invaders, plasma cannons blazing. They fought with desperate courage, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Geoffrey didn't hesitate. He kicked his engines to full burn and dove into the maelstrom, weapons hot. His advanced shields shrugged off the enemy fire as he punched through their lines, his own cannons spitting blue-white death. "Earth Fleet, this is Geoffrey Warren," he transmitted on an open channel. "I'm here to help. Who's in charge?" "Likewise, Admiral," Geoffrey said. "I've got an idea. That dreadnought off the starboard bow, its shields look like they're fluctuating. If we combine our fire on that spot—" "I see it," Helios said. "All ships, concentrate your fire on these coordinates, full barrage." Geoffrey lined up his shot, his targeting computer linking with the other Earth ships. As one, they unleashed a storm of plasma, missiles and laser fire. The dreadnought's shields flared, flashed and died. A second volley tore into its hull, ripping through armor and vital systems. The massive ship listed to one side, venting atmosphere and debris. "Their formation is breaking," Helios shouted. "Geoffrey, take a squadron and head for the surface. Our ground forces need support. We'll keep these bastards busy up here." "Roger that, Admiral, I'm on it." Geoffrey peeled away from the space battle, a dozen Earth fighters falling into formation behind him. They knifed into the atmosphere, their hulls glowing red-hot. Instantly, a hurricane of anti-aircraft fire erupted from the ground, filling the sky with deadly energy. Shadow Collective artillery and surface-to-air batteries, their positions revealed by the muzzle flashes. "Evasive maneuvers," Geoffrey barked. "Stay low, stay fast, strafe those gun emplacements as you pass, don't give them a straight shot." He jinked and rolled, his ship dancing between the deadly beams. His wingmen followed suit, plasma cannons raking the enemy positions. Fireballs blossomed in their wake as ammo dumps and fuel stores ignited. Geoffrey's comm crackled with a burst of static. A voice, broken and faint, filtered through the white noise. "Geoffrey, they're here. They've taken the research facility. They're after the hydronium." "All fighters, continue supporting our ground forces," Geoffrey ordered. "I'm going after the enemy's primary objective. Iverson, if you can hear me, I'm on my way. Hold on." He banked hard, his ship's engines screaming as he pushed them past the red line. The research facility was deep in Shadow Collective-held territory. Geoffrey flew low and fast, skimming over the war-torn landscape. As the facility came into view, his heart sank. It was swarming with enemy troops and vehicles, an impenetrable hive of activity. And there, near the entrance, was Iverson's hoverbike, its once sleek hull pitted and scorched by laser fire. Geoffrey set his ship down in a ravine a click from the facility, out of sight of the enemy forces. He armed himself with his pulse rifle, plasma grenades, and a bandolier of power cells. Enough firepower to take on a small army, which was exactly what he was about to do. He activated his tactical cloak, shimmering out of visibility, and set out at a fast clip through the harsh, unforgiving terrain. As he approached the facility's perimeter, he spotted the bodies of human guards and scientists, cut down as they'd tried to flee. His jaw clenched. The Shadow Collective would pay for every life. The Shadow. Using his knowledge of the facility's layout from his previous visit, Geoffrey slipped past the outer sentries and into the building itself. The corridors were choked with the dead, the walls pitted and blackened by weapons fire. Alarms blared and emergency lights flashed, casting eerie shadows. Geoffrey moved deeper into the facility, senses straining for any sign of Iverson or the enemy. He was nearing the central hydronium containment chambers when he heard it, the zap and whine of energy weapons, voices shouting in anger and pain, the distinctive hum of a hoverbike's engines. He quickened his pace, pulse pounding in his ears. He came to the heavy blast doors of the containment chamber. They were buckled and scarred, half melted by some incredible heat. Geoffrey shouldered through the gap, rifle at the ready. In the center of the chamber, connected to the primary hydronium storage tanks by a maze of pipes and cables, was a monstrous device. It pulsed with the same sickly blue glow as the hydronium itself. And there, standing at its controls, was a figure Geoffrey had hoped never to see again. Alias Raven, the leader of the Shadow Collective. His dark hair was shot through with grey, his face lined and weathered, but his eyes burned with the same merciless cruelty Geoffrey remembered. Raven looked up from the control panel, his gaze locking with Geoffrey's across the chamber. His lips curled in a predatory smile. "Geoffrey Warren," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "I had a feeling you'd show up. You never could resist playing the hero." He gestured to the pulsing machine. "Magnificent, isn't it? Dr. Iverson's life's work. A hydronium amplifier, capable of boosting the compound's destructive potential 100-fold. With this, I can reduce entire planets to ash with the push of a button. And Earth, with its rich hydronium deposits, will be the first to burn." Geoffrey raised his rifle, aiming it squarely at Raven's chest. "Over my dead body," he growled. Raven laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "Oh, that can be arranged." He turned to his soldiers. "Kill them both." The Shadow Collective troopers leveled their weapons at Geoffrey and Iverson. Geoffrey dove for cover as a storm of plasma bolts filled the air. The battle for Earth, for the entire galaxy, had begun. Geoffrey whipped his rifle up and unleashed a volley of searing plasma bolts at Raven, the Shadow Collective leader. The bolts slammed into an invisible barrier, inches from Raven's sneering face, dissipating harmlessly. Raven threw his head back and laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "Foolish human, your pathetic weapons are useless against me." He gestured to the pulsing hydronium amplifier behind him. "With this device, I will bring the galaxy to its knees, starting with your precious Earth." Geoffrey's heart pounded as he realized the truth in Raven's words. The leader's personal energy shield was impenetrable, and the amplifier was already thrumming with barely contained power. Earth and the entire galaxy were on the brink of subjugation. In a last desperate gambit, Geoffrey swung his rifle towards the towering hydronium storage tanks, feeding into the amplifier. If he couldn't stop Raven directly, he could at least cut off his supply of the volatile compound. Geoffrey's finger tightened on the trigger, unleashing a barrage of plasma at the tanks. But before the bolts could connect, Raven's shield suddenly expanded, enveloping the entire amplifier and its fuel source in a shimmering cocoon of energy. Geoffrey's shots fizzled uselessly against the impenetrable barrier. Dr. Iverson, battling on his hoverbike nearby, saw the futility of Geoffrey's efforts. He gunned his engines, dodging and weaving through the Shadow Collective soldiers' fire, and pulled up alongside Geoffrey. "There's no use," Iverson shouted over the din of battle. "You have to get out of here. Warn the Council of Raven's plan." "I'm not leaving you," Geoffrey yelled back, still firing fruitlessly at Raven's shield. Iverson's expression hardened with resolve. "You have to. The galaxy needs you, Geoffrey." With those words, he wrenched his bike's controls, sending it into a suicidal charge directly at the amplifier's exposed control panel. "Iverson, no," Geoffrey screamed, but it was too late. Iverson's bike slammed into the panel in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Instantly, the amplifier's hum rose to a deafening shriek, the machine shuddering and convulsing as raw hydronium poured into its overloading circuits. Raven's eyes widened in horrified realization. He lunged for the amplifier, hands flying over its controls in a desperate attempt to shut it down, but the device was too far gone, its containment systems crumbling under the surge of uncontrolled power. The hydronium storage tanks ruptured, venting torrents of glowing blue liquid. The amplifier convulsed one final time, then detonated in a cataclysmic explosion of blinding light and searing heat. Geoffrey felt the shockwave slam into him like a physical blow, hurling him backwards. His suit's energy shields screamed warnings as they strained to protect him from the hellish inferno. He hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop in a clatter of debris. For a long moment he lay stunned, his ears ringing, vision swimming. Groaning, Geoffrey dragged himself upright, blinking away the after-images seared into his retinas. As his vision cleared, he stared in numb shock at the scene of devastation before him. The research facility was a smoking ruin, its walls blasted outward, equipment reduced to molten slag. Of Raven and his soldiers there was no sign, vaporized in the hydronium conflagration. Geoffrey stumbled forward, dread rising in his throat as he spotted a familiar shape amid the wreckage. Iverson's hoverbike, reduced to a blackened husk. And there, sprawled beside it, was Iverson himself. Geoffrey staggered to his friend's side and fell to his knees. Iverson was barely recognizable, his body charred beyond belief by the searing hydronium blast. But his eyes, one organic, one cybernetic, were still open, staring sightlessly at the smoke-filled sky. As emergency klaxons began to wail in the distance, Geoffrey forced himself to his feet. He had to get back to his ship, back to the Council. Earth may have been saved from the Shadow Collective's immediate invasion, but the galaxy was still in peril. And with Iverson gone, the burden of that knowledge now fell to Geoffrey alone. He cast one last anguished look at Iverson's body, then turned and limped towards the distant glimmer of his ship, his heart heavy with grief and grim determination. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. In orbit, the battered Earth fleet, bolstered by the timely arrival of the Council's reinforcements, drove the last of the Shadow Collective warships into retreat. The once pristine blue marble of Earth was now marred by ugly scars of blackened continents and smoke-choked skies, a sobering testament to the brutality of the invasion. As Geoffrey wearily ascended the ramp into his ship, he was met by a Council representative, her face grave. "Geoffrey Warren, the Council extends its deepest gratitude for your heroic actions in defense of Earth and Aquinos, but I fear this is only the beginning." Geoffrey nodded heavily. "The Shadow Collective may be in retreat, but they'll be back, and intel suggests they're not the only threat out there." He glanced out the viewport at the ravaged Earth hanging in space. "We've got a long fight ahead of us." The representative placed a hand on Geoffrey's shoulder. "The Council has officially appointed you as Earth's representative and our chief agent in the field. The galaxy needs a champion, Geoffrey, someone who can inspire hope in the face of the coming darkness." Geoffrey's jaw tightened with resolve. In his mind's eye he saw Iverson's face, Jen's, the countless others who had fought and sacrificed to get him to this point. "I'll do whatever it takes," he vowed, "for Earth, for the galaxy, for all those who can't fight for themselves." He strode to the ship's controls, his exhaustion falling away, replaced by a steely sense of purpose. As the ship lifted off, Geoffrey input coordinates for the Council's headquarters. There was no time to waste. The Shadow Collective would regroup. New threats would emerge from the galactic shadows, and he, Geoffrey Warren, would be ready to meet them head-on. As the ship accelerated towards the stars, Geoffrey allowed himself a moment to grieve for Iverson, for the lives lost in the invasion. But he couldn't afford to dwell on the past. The future of the galaxy, of all he held dear, depended on him. He would carry on Iverson's legacy. He would use his knowledge of hydronium to help those in need, to forge new alliances, to fight the darkness threatening to engulf the galaxy. It would be a long, hard road, fraught with danger and difficult choices. Geoffrey knew that all too well, but as Earth receded behind him, the infinite expanse of space stretching out before his viewscreen, he felt a flicker of hope amidst the grief and uncertainty. Earth had its water, and now it had its champion. The story of the human who had saved two worlds was only just beginning, and Geoffrey Warren would ensure it was a story of hope, of courage, of light triumphing over the darkness, no matter the cost. As stars blurred into starlines, Geoffrey's ship leapt into the void, carrying with it the fate of the galaxy. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.